Obviously, Sheriff Wagner is with us today. We're very pleased that he would join us. He has served as the Lancaster County Sheriff for pushing 25 years now.
21.
21 years. He started out as a dispatcher in 1976 when you were 21.
That's right.
If I read that properly.
Yeah.
Subsequently served as a deputy sheriff, and I learned just now he's going to be completing 41 years of service in Lancaster County this coming June. He's a graduate of the FBI Academy, actively involved in the professional law enforcement field, and among other capacities served as the president of the Nebraska Sheriff's Association. Sheriff Wagner.
Thank you, Dr. Eskridge. Appreciate it. I want to make this as really as informative as possible, and I was going to title that slide Sheriff's Office 101 because a lot of people don't know necessarily what the Sheriff's Office does or do. So before I start that, let's see. I always preface my presentations with a dedication to Deputy Sheriff Craig Dodge. He was killed March 14th, 1987. So it'll be 30 years ago in a couple months here that Deputy Dodge was killed responding to a domestic disturbance in Hickman, Nebraska. Just a reminder, almost more so for me, but it's dangerous business. And our folks do a great job and they put their lives on the line every day. Real quickly, just a history of sheriff's offices. And how many of you know of sheriffs in historical days? Think of any sheriffs from the past? Well, he was U.S. Marshal. Matt Dillon was a U.S. Marshal on Gunsmoke. Anybody else think of a famous sheriff in history? Okay, well, we'll get back to that. Think about that question. But I'm sorry, I better quit moving around here, I'm the cameraman. Okay. In England, the counties are called shires. So you have Lancaster Shire, Nottinghamshire, Hertfordshire, those kinds of things. And in the ancient days, around 500 AD and thereabouts, the Anglo-Saxons banded together in groups of 10. They were called tons, and that morphed into our current word of town. And then the shires were organized, and the reef was the head of the shire, and that became sheriff, and that's the root word of sheriff, sheriff. So if you think about it, in the late 1100s story of Robin Hood and the Sheriff of Nottingham accurately reflects the power and corruption that sheriffs had in ancient England. Anybody remember, do you know the story about Sheriff of Nottingham and Robin Hood and all that sort of thing? Okay. I know you know. Did you guys all know? Did you watch MeTV or anything? Okay. The Sheriff of Nottingham was never really named in the movie. He was just the Sheriff of Nottingham. But the Robin Hood stole from the rich, gave to the poor. The primary role of the sheriff was to collect taxes. So when King John proclaimed a tax on the people, it was the sheriff's role to collect it. This is a great movie from the 30s. It's probably one of the, I think, most famous Robin Hood movies. Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland, Basil Rathbone, a great group of folks. If you ever get a chance to Netflix that, do so. It's a great movie. The history of the office of sheriff. In 1215, the Magna Carta was passed in England. The title, or the office of sheriff, is mentioned 7 times in that document, most of them negative and restrictive. So from the Magna Carta, you know, we got our current Bill of Rights, trial by jury. A number of those rights that we still enjoy today came from the Magna Carta. 1634, Virginia organized the first counties in America. Shortly thereafter, in 1651, William Waters was the first elected sheriff in America. His duties included tax collection, law enforcement, jail, and prison administration. Interestingly enough, many sheriffs across the nation still perform those same duties. In some counties, the sheriff was the chief executive officer of the county, and it's from that responsibility that summoning juries, and serving criminal and civil process, some of the other duties that we still do today. Now, any other famous, real or imaginary sheriffs that you can think of? I gave you one of them, Sheriff of Nottingham. Wyatt Earp, I'm thinking that he was the U.S. Marshal as well. Yeah, in Tombstone, Arizona. I just saw that movie, so I should know that, but I was thinking he was. Okay. Well, Sheriff Joe Arpaio. How many of you have heard of Sheriff Joe Arpaio? He was the sheriff down in Maricopa County, Arizona for about 22, 23, 24 years. Just got beat this last November in the election. Retired DEA agent and then ran for sheriff in his 50s and was elected. It's like 86 years old and very, very controversial. But, well, here's one. Andy Taylor. Any of you ever seen the Andy Taylor show? You got Sheriff Taylor, Aunt B, Opie, who is Ron Howard. Any of you know Ron Howard from his directing days and so on. But Barney, his faithful deputy, Barney Fife, is on your left. Anybody know what Barney's famous for? Has anybody ever seen this show? Okay, we've got a few. Well, he shot his gun off in his pocket, and that's why Andy made him carry his bullet in his pocket, because he fired through his holster, and so he had to take his bullets out of his gun. Andy gave him one bullet, stuck in his pocket, and Barney is pretty high-strung. I think that's probably fair to say. But the interesting thing about this show, and if you get a chance, if you watch MeTV at all, it's on every day from I think 6 to 7 or something like that. The interesting thing is Andy Taylor never wears a gun. Mayberry's a quiet little town in I think South Carolina, and it's just Andy and Barney. Barney's, like I said, pretty high strung, strives to be very professional, gets a little carried away at times. Andy's pretty laid back, doesn't carry a gun, and the majority of his law enforcement actions are mediation. And if you look at that show from that perspective, it would really be nice if that's really the way law enforcement still worked. If we could just mediate everything, let folks go on their way. The town drunk, Otis, he'd get drunk and he'd just come let himself in jail and sleep it off, and then let himself out in the morning and go home. Very laid back sort of arrangement. The history of Lancaster County. The first sheriff in Lancaster County was in 1861. Lewis Loader was appointed as the first sheriff in Lancaster County. Probably the best known sheriff in Lancaster County is Merle Carnop. He hired me in 1976. He served as sheriff from 1951 until 1979 for 28 years. He's the longest serving sheriff in our history. But he's best known as, first of all, he was the president of the National Sheriff's Association, which is the largest professional organization in the nation. And he was also a sheriff during the time of the Starkweather homicides. You all know about the Starkweather homicides in the 50s? About 1958, Charles Starkweather killed 11 people in Lincoln, Lancaster County. And Sheriff Carnop is on the left. On the right there, you see him taking Charles Starkweather to court, and in both those photos. But Charles Starkweather was very interesting. Lived across the street for a time from the jail for a time in a row house apartments. Played with Merle Carnop's son, Dennis, who's an attorney in Bend, Oregon now. And so Charles Starkweather had been, the sheriff had an apartment above the jail, and Charles Starkweather had been in the sheriff's house chumming with his son, Dennis. This is Lancaster County, 24 miles wide by 36 miles north and south. So about 864 square miles, 846 square miles. 23 cities, towns, and villages in Lancaster County, and only one of them has a police department, Lincoln. So all of the other 22 towns and villages and cities rely upon us for their law enforcement services. Well, so about 300,000 population in the county. I suppose I added one too many zeros there in my present. It's not 3 million, it's 300,000. But we have 7 state recreation areas. Many of you probably have been to Branch Oak Lake and Pawnee Lake and those kinds of areas. Interstate 80, of course, runs through east to west. We have 3 United States highways, Highway 77, Highway 6, and Highway 34, and then 3 Nebraska highways, Highway 2, Highway 33, and Highway 43. Depending upon our location within the county, we share concurrent jurisdiction with State Patrol, Game and Parks Commission at the lakes, UNLPD at UNL functions and properties, LPD in the city, and then with federal agencies on a couple of task forces that we serve on. We have 104 employees, 78 deputy sheriffs, 26 support staff. We're about the 7th largest law enforcement agency in the state with about a $12.5 million budget. I don't get to spend all that personally, but this is our organizational chart. Nothing magical about it. It's just what works for us. Some agencies have 3 divisions. We happen to have 5 divisions. And I'll go through them real quickly with you, but the reason I even show you this is because a lot of people ask, what's the difference between the Sheriff's Office, the Police Department, State Patrol, UNLPD? And really, that red line that's up there, everything to the left of it, we sort of share those functions with the other law enforcement agencies that I mentioned. Everything to the right of that line are duties that are statutorily mandated for sheriffs to perform. So for example, in criminal investigations, pretty self-explanatory, those are plainclothes investigators. They conduct in-depth investigations, generally as follow-up, that patrol deputies take the initial report, investigators do the follow-up and conduct some of the more in-depth interviews and investigative techniques that are necessary for some cases. They may be first responders on cases like homicide or suspicious deaths, those kinds of things. We also are part of a fugitive task force. It's part of the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force, so we have a couple of deputies assigned to that, along with Lincoln police officers, deputy U.S. Marshals, state troopers, and other surrounding counties. We also are part of a Lincoln Lancaster County Narcotics Task Force, which is based out of the police department. It's headed by them. We supply personnel. UNL supplies personnel, and they are what it is. It's Narcotics Task Force. They conduct undercover narcotics investigations. And we also have crime scene investigators and crime scene technicians. They're deputy sheriffs that their primary job could be anything within the agency, but when a major case or crime occurs, they go do crime scene investigative work. This is a joint venture with the police department, and so when they have a major crime, we'll send our folks to help. When we have a major crime, they'll send their folks to help. Our patrol division, the 2nd division over there, it's the uniformed folks that you see every day. They're the folks that drive marked patrol units. They have an assigned patrol district. They respond to calls for service, investigate traffic crashes, write traffic tickets, respond to domestic calls, alarms, burglaries, thefts, and any other kind of crime. Those are the folks that are out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, while most of us are sleeping or should be sleeping after midnight. And we have a canine. Now we have 2 canine units that are assigned to our patrol division. They work opposite days of the days off, or opposite days of the week, so that we try to have a dog on duty every day of the week. And we coordinate with Lincoln Police Department, with State Patrol, so that if we don't have a dog on, we can rely on one of those agencies. If they don't have a dog on, they can rely on us for whatever functions the dog might perform. That canine assignment is a really highly coveted position. It usually lasts between 6 and 7 years, and The deputies that handle the canines really enjoy that work. They really enjoy having that dog as a partner, and they really enjoy it. It's a strange bond. I don't think I'd want a dog in my car. They shed. There's a lot of care involved. I've gotten into patrol cars before that used to be canine units, and you turn the air conditioning on and you can smell dog in the air conditioning, and I'm thinking, I'm not so sure I'd want to have a dog in my car all the time. But and then we have an accident reconstruction team. Again, this is a peripheral duty, so those deputies could be assigned anywhere within our agency, and then when we have a serious crash, generally serious injury or fatal crash, our crash team goes out and conducts the interview or the investigation at the scene and the interviews afterward. And then we have a tactical response unit. That's a SWAT team, if you would. That's also a peripheral duty, and those deputies that come from with any agency or any division within the agency. And when we have either a barricaded gunman or some situation that is beyond the capability of our patrol deputies, we'll call our tactical response unit in. So that's really where our similarity to other law enforcement agency ends. All of the rest of the duties on the right are those duties, like I said, that are uniquely performed by sheriffs across the state. Civil process is the first division. It's probably, we talked a little bit about it in some of those ancient sheriff's duties. Service of subpoenas and subpoenas, divorce papers, protection orders, all those kinds of lawsuits that get filed in the court. We serve those documents. Tax collection, believe it or not, that was a duty of the Sheriff of Nottingham back in 1100 AD, and it's still a duty that we perform today. So if somebody does not pay their property taxes, the county treasurer will issue a tax warrant. It comes to us, and we will make an attempt to collect on those taxes, up to and including seizing property and selling it to satisfy those taxes. So that stuff, that still goes on, and executions, it's not what you think. We don't execute people. We execute the orders of the court. So if John sues Mary and for whatever reason is awarded a judgment of $1,000, if John won't pay or can't pay, then we will execute on his property to satisfy the order of the court. And so we have a division, number of deputies that handle all of those kinds of documents. Replevins, executions, landlord-tenant dispute, things we get involved in with evictions on a regular basis. And then we also do title inspections. That's another task that was given to sheriffs across the state. Any vehicle that's brought into this county from another state has to be inspected by the sheriff. So last year we inspected about 15,000 cars that came into this county. Special services, that's our court security unit primarily. If you've been to the county city building or to the Justice and Law Enforcement Center, you'll have gone through one of the security checkpoints. Those employees are part of this division. So they screen everybody entering the building. And then we have deputies up on the floors for each court. We're mandated by statute to attend to the district court and to the county court, and then that has filtered to the district court or to the juvenile court as well. So we have about 19 judges in our building, and we provide security for all 19 judges, county, district, and juvenile, as well as for witnesses, jurors, litigants, everybody that's involved in the court process. Our job is to make sure that they're secure and safe when they're in our building. Building security, prisoner transportation. Last year we transported about 2,500 prisoners around the state. So if somebody is wanted in this county and they're located in another county in the state, they get arrested, we go pick them up, bring them back to Lancaster County. Likewise, we do interstate extraditions. Last year we returned about 65 fugitives to Lancaster County from other states. So that's a whole different process, but it's still one that we perform, and we'll either drive or fly and return those prisoners to Lancaster County. Administrative support, it's sort of a conglomeration of all the rest of the tasks that we do. Our records unit, those folks are support staff that man our records desk 24 hours a day. They answer the telephones. They process all of the incoming reports from the deputies. They make entries of stolen property and inquiries into NCIC, NCIS. Handgun permits, another task that we were given back in 1991, and we have seen a huge spike. They just did a news article about it on the television here a couple of days ago. Huge spike with the recent, since about the last 8 years, when it looked like Barack Obama was going to get elected, which meant to some people that there'd be some gun control laws passed. We had a huge spike in handgun purchase permits. And then every time some legislature, either on the state level or the national level, talks about gun restrictions or any kind of restriction on firearms, we see a pretty good spike in our handgun purchase permits. So in October, when it looked like Hillary might win the November election, we again saw a huge spike in the number of handgun purchase permits. So hopefully now things will level off a bit, but it's been kind of a crazy roller coaster with those permits, and it's directly related to the political climate in our nation. Sex offender registrations, anybody that's convicted of a sex offense that's ordered by the judge to register as a sex offender has to do so with our office. Some of those folks do it quarterly, some do it twice a year, and some do it annually, depending upon their level of classification. So we'll have about 2,500 visits from sex offenders a year in our office. This is just a picture of one of our shifts. You can see the guys in shorts were on bike patrol that day. That happens to be in front of Memorial Stadium, and a couple of our patrol cars. Just a few of our stats for last year to give us an idea of our workload. About 9,700 calls for service last year. That's pretty static. We provide law enforcement services to those unincorporated areas outside of Lincoln. And so as Lincoln grows, generally the fringes of Lincoln grow first in the county, our population will increase, and then Lincoln will annex those population bases, and our population that we serve will decrease. So over the last 20 years, we've seen almost a sawtooth effect on the population base that we serve. It has stayed pretty constant. About 90% of people in Lancaster County live in Lincoln, and about 10% of the people in Lancaster County live in the rural areas. And we provide services, law enforcement services, to those 10%. Now, some of our other tasks, like our court duties and some of those kind of things, are population related for the entire county. So you can kind of gauge our warrants and some of those other court-related duties from the county perspective. Suspended drivers, DUI arrests, like I said, 2,600 prisoners transported last year. We have folks on the road every day hauling prisoners back and forth from state facilities to court and from other counties to our county. About 5,700 arrest warrants received last year. About 4,700 of those were served. About 15,000 documents on the civil process side, and that's when I mentioned subpoenas, divorce decrees, summonses and petitions, those kinds of things. And it's not just a matter of delivering the mail to somebody's house. Those kinds of documents have to be delivered personally to the person named on the document. So we may have to make 2, 3, or 4 attempts to make service of those court papers. So it's a little bit more labor intensive than one might think. Sex offender registrations, about 3,500. Firearms purchase permits, 8 years ago, we were in the 2,000 range. Now we're up to about 4,700 a year. Sick leave usage, that's not a big deal for a lot of you, but it's a big deal for me. Our office uses about half of the average sick leave of the rest of the county employees. We have an honor guard, so we have a few deputies that have been specially trained and perform ceremonial services. This happens to be at the Nebraska Law Enforcement Memorial in Grand Island, but they have performed at Memorial Stadium before at the beginning of football games for the flag, and assisted other color guards as well. I mentioned bike patrol. We have, you wouldn't think that a rural law enforcement agency would have much use for a bike patrol, but in some of the smaller cities like Waverly and Hickman, Waverly right now is about 3,200 people population-wise. Hickman's about 2,000. A bicycle works really well in that smaller geographical area to get around quietly and quickly. We also have several bike trails, the Jamaica Trail going south, and then the Mopac Trail going east out of Lincoln that we provide law enforcement services for. So it's good to have deputies on bikes on those things just to try to keep down any criminal activity we might have on the bike paths. This is we have a firearms range, and so we conduct all kinds of training at our range. It's in our southern part of Lancaster County, and we've had it for about 35 years. It's very nice to be able to take our employees down to our facility and train firearms, defensive tactics, those kinds of things. But we qualify internally 4 times a year on our handguns, and then we have rifle and shotgun training as well. This is our defensive tactics training. As you can see, the deputy's got a baton on the far right there, and we conduct this training on a regular basis. The way our scheduling works, and this is just our office, not any other agency, but our patrol deputies work 4 10-hour shifts, and half of them are off Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and half of them are off Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So everybody works Wednesday. So half the department will train one Wednesday, and then half the department will train the next Wednesday. And that way we can maintain a good, adequate training schedule so that folks can maintain those skill sets that they need to do their job on the road. And there's a number of training skills that are mandated. The state has said you will provide training in domestic violence, in pursuit driving, in firearms proficiency. So, and just a couple of years ago, the state mandated 20 hours of continuing education for law enforcement officers per year. By policy, we require 40 hours, so the 20 hours hasn't been an issue for us, but it is something that we pay attention to. The vehicle in the back there is our mobile command vehicle, or MCV. This goes out on major crime scenes, major crash investigations. We used it, if you saw the picture of the Honor Guard, we took it out to Grand Island for that function. When we had the Hallam tornadoes, we had a big natural disaster about 12 years ago. These things were on site for days at a time, providing command and control for our employees who were at those scenes. I mentioned we have a tactical response unit, which is our standard SWAT team. So we have deputies that, it's a part-time job for them. They do any job within the agency, either court security, patrol, investigations, or civil process. But when the call goes out that we need these folks for those additional skills, they suit up and go. This is a little kind of a controversial topic on a national basis. A number of years ago, we were able to obtain, this is a surplus military MRAP, mine-resistant ambush protected vehicle that came from Kuwait when it wasn't needed over there, and we were able to obtain it, paint it, and it's our rescue vehicle. So when Lincoln had floods a couple of years ago, I think it was March or May of 2015, while the water was deep, there were little pockets of high ground where boats couldn't get through because the water was high and low and high and low. And so we call it the IRV, our emergency rescue vehicle. It was able to get through those waters, get to locations that other vehicles or boats couldn't get to, and rescue some of the folks that were stuck. Now, you'll notice there's a turret on top. There is no weapon mounted on that turret, but that's one of the big controversial things that the Obama administration put a bunch of restrictions on, was obtaining a surplus military weapons specifically, but sometimes in some cases, vehicles as well. That's what it looks like on dry ground. So you can see that turret up top, it turns, but there's no weapon mounted on it. It's a good vantage point, and generally when we're going from point A to point B in traffic, we put somebody up there just to be able to see, because it's a real difficult vehicle to drive, and it's kind of a weird driving sensation. Again, this is just one of our shifts of deputies. You can see our canine unit on the left there. That's Sasha. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Dax. But really good dog. We've been using Belgian Malinois have been the two dogs that we've been using for the last number of years. So we have two of those now. They're a little bit smaller than a shepherd, but just as versatile and just as useful as a German shepherd is. And they're not subject to some of the health issues that the German shepherds have been plagued with, like hip dysplasia, those kinds of things. I talked about our crash investigation team, our accident reconstruction specialists. I always joke and say that when I actually worked for a living when I was on the road, that I was one of those guys that did accident reconstruction. Actually, I was our first accident reconstructionist, and for a time there, I was our only accident reconstructionist, and kept real busy. We'll work up to we'll go anywhere between 6 and 12 fatal crashes a year. And so that can keep folks pretty busy, because there's a lot of, after the scene is stabilized and after all that stuff's done, there's a lot of other work to be done to determine kind of what happened, why it happened, and kind of how it happened. So we use the latest tools. We just got a new tool. There'll be an article in the newspaper about it. I think it's probably this coming Monday. It's a laser scanner, and the brand name is Faro, F-A-R-O, but it does 3D scanning of crime scenes and crash scenes. And we were able to buy this piece of equipment a couple of years ago with forfeited assets. We have used it on a number of our crime scenes, as well as with the police department on a number of their crime scenes. And when you get a scan from the Faro, it looks like a photograph. It's in 3D. It is able to distinguish color by the pixels and some of that stuff I don't understand, but it's been used at least once in the court presentation now, and the prosecutors just love the product that it puts out, and eliminates and alleviates some of the issues with still photos. With still photos, you have to show from this angle, from this angle, from this angle, from this angle, and try to piece that together. With the 3D imaging, it shows you a picture in 3D that's really much clearer and much more understandable. So employment opportunities, I don't know how many of you in here hope to be a law enforcement officer one day, but basically here are some of our minimum requirements to be deputy sheriff. Number one, you have to be 21 years of age. Secondly, you need to have a high school graduate or GED. While we have hired people with GEDs, with high school diplomas, to be honest with you, and I'll give you some numbers here in just a minute, but when we have an opening for one or two deputy sheriffs, we'll get 200 plus applicants. And I'll give you a clue on who do you think rises to the top of that applicant pool. It's going to be those folks with generally at least a 2, but usually a 4-year degree. You have to have a valid driver's license to be a U.S. citizen. You have to read, write, and speak English fluently. No felonies or certain misdemeanor convictions are allowed. Domestic violence is probably one of the big disqualifiers, and the reason you can't be a law enforcement officer if you've had a domestic violence conviction is because you're disqualified from carrying a firearm. So if you have a domestic violence conviction, you can't be a law enforcement officer in this nation. Possess good character, and that's really an all-encompassing kind of subjective sort of label, but you have to lead your life honorably and with integrity. And some of the biggest disqualifiers that I see for new applicants coming in are drug usage. You can't have used any marijuana within 2 years of having applied for us, and you can't have used any opiates for 5 years or other scheduled drugs for 5 years before applying with us. So those two items are huge disqualifiers for our new applicants. One of the big issues we're seeing now is prescription medication diversion. And so, for instance, if I had a headache and my wife had a prescription for a narcotic for a pain suppression, if I took one of her pills, that's a felony. That's actually diverting because I don't have a prescription for it and I'm taking her pills. And so that has become a huge issue with our new applicants. The selection process. So this year, in October or September, I guess we had 204 applicants. Then after the application process, we give a written examination. 75 people showed up. And that's about the norm. It's about 40% of the people that apply show up. And if you've seen one of our application packets, they're quite thick. And they require a lot of work on the applicant's part to fill out all of their background information and all that sort of thing. And I'm thinking, why would you go to the work to fill that out and then not show up to take the test? I never have been able to figure out the answer to that question. It slays me. So of the 75 that tested, 30 did not pass the test. So that left 45 applicants out of 202 or 204 that we're down to. We also, immediately after the written test, we administered a physical agility test. And you can get all these on our website. So if you're writing this stuff down or whatever, you can just get it from our website. It'll tell you all about it. One failure on the physical agility test. Then we do an oral interview panel. So we have about 3 deputies that will go through your background statement with you and talk about some of those things in our lives that maybe we're not too proud of that we did, but they're important that we know what's in your background. 8 were disqualified, and generally it was for narcotics use within those time frames that I talked about. So they were disqualified from doing that. So now we're down to about 28 that were actually finally interviewed. And then a final interview with, by law, I'm required to consider the top 3 applicants. So we'll interview the top 3 applicants, make a selection and make a conditional job offer to those folks, to that person. And then following that offer of employment, the first thing we do is put the applicant on, give them a polygraph examination to make sure that the information they provided for us is true. Psychological evaluation to make sure that, their head's screwed on straight, make sure that they can do the job and see some of the things that we have to see and continue to function. Medical examinations, just make sure they're physically fit, drug screen. And then the final test is a TABE test, which is the test of adult basic education, which is the entrance examination for the Nebraska Law Enforcement Training Center in Grand Island. So after we hire somebody, we get them on board about a week before Grand Island starts. There are 4 training academies in the state. Omaha PD runs their own, Lincoln Police run their own, the Nebraska State Patrol runs their own, and then all of the remaining agencies in the state go to the Nebraska Law Enforcement Training Center in Grand Island. It's a 16-week-long program. It's a live-in academy. Come home on the weekends. And so we send our folks out there, and I might add, we pay for all of this, and they get a wage while they're there. So it's kind of unique to law enforcement that we do it this way. Most professions like medical field, nursing, other fields, you end up having to pay for your education and then go find yourself a job with that education. This is one of those things where we try to find those people that are suited for law enforcement and then train them to be a law enforcement officer. We have a 13-week field training program once you get back from Grand Island. So for about 6 months, you're basically worthless to us. It's an entire training period that's just, we'll invest about $50,000 in new applicants, getting them hired and trained and ready to go on the road by themselves. And then after the field training program, if they successfully complete that, then they're out on their own and they're on probation for a year. Interestingly enough, rural law enforcement is definitely different than urban law enforcement. And some folks, they think, what's most of our mind's image of law enforcement is what we see on television. When I was a kid, it was 1 Adam 12 and SWAT and those kinds of shows. Now it's CSI Miami, CSI New York, CSI New Orleans, CSI Los Angeles. I mean, that's Hawaii Five-0. Those kinds of shows show not quite unrealistic, but certainly more of a romantic version of law enforcement than we see sometimes. But everybody's not suited for law enforcement. We also handle coroner's investigations. We worked about 1,500 coroner calls last year in Lancaster County, and some people can't deal with that death very well. And so if you remember A Few Good Men, Jack Nicholson, when he's on the stand in A Few Good Men, he says, "You have the luxury of not knowing what I know," and that's the absolute truth with the majority of our citizens. They have the luxury of not knowing what we know. They have the luxury of not seeing what we see and dealing with what we have to deal with. So it really is. Some folks aren't cut out for it, and they don't know that till they get on their own, and they're out 25 miles south of town, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and a couple of big guys want to kick your butt. It gets a little tough. Starting salary is very good. In the day, law enforcement didn't pay well at all, but it has certainly come up in the last 20 years. Currently, our new deputies start about $47,000 a year, which is better than most entry-level teaching positions. We get overtime for over 40 hours, so time and a half for over 40, and that happens on a regular basis. We give our new employees 8 hours of paid vacation. They get 11 paid holidays per year. They may have to work them, but if they work them, we pay them premium pay for those days. 104 sick leave hours per year, which is about a day a month. Subsidized health and dental insurance, and then defined contribution retirement plan, and the county contributes $1.50 for every buck our employees contribute. So the benefit package is very good, and the wage has become very competitive. We provide pretty much all of the deputies' equipment, besides their socks, underwear, and t-shirt, and their shoes. Everything that they wear, we supply. We clean it for them, so there's no reason to have a dirty or sloppy uniform. We provide body armor for our employees, and all of the other duty equipment that you see us wear. And we also have tuition reimbursement for those individuals that get hired that either don't have a degree or want to go back for their graduate degree. We have a tuition reimbursement program through our deputies are part of the Fraternal Order of Police, and through that contract, they have negotiated tuition reimbursement. So that's a great benefit to have too. Dr. Eskridge and I were talking earlier when we were young, when I was thinking about law enforcement, there was a federal program called LEAP, Law Enforcement Education Assistance Program, and it funded a lot of college hours for a lot of folks that were in the criminal justice program. We also have take-home patrol vehicles, which is a huge benefit not only to the employee but to the county as well. We're spread pretty thin, and so when we have deputies that are assigned as accident reconstructionists, as tactical response unit members, as a canine handler, they get called out more frequently than you might imagine. And so it's really good for us and good for our citizens that these deputies can respond from their residence, they have their equipment with them, and they can go right to the scene and not have to report somewhere, get their patrol car and their equipment, and then respond to the scene of the incident. So it's really a huge advantage for us. And on days like today, you know, the day shift got called in early because of the number of crashes we were working this morning because of the roadway conditions. And so, you know, that sort of thing happens as well. Our cars are really state-of-the-art. They've got in-car computers, in-car cameras, mobile radar. They got partitions between the front and rear, passenger compartment barrier, stop sticks. Those are those spikes that help stop pursuits. And the latest in safety equipment. We're always experimenting with bigger and better emergency lights, sirens, reflective graphics on the car so that we can be seen at night, those kinds of things. We now put more money and equipment in those cars than the purchase value of the car. So they really are the deputy's office, if you would, and they're rolling around in a $50,000 office. And then, one last benefit. So with that, that's my presentation, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have, or anything that I might have forgotten to mention. Okay. Okay.
So, given this is student population, when you're seeing new folks come up.
Click that on. It's not. Okay.
Okay, there we go. Since we have a student population here, as you see new officers come on board, what are some of the academic courses that would benefit them most, and or skills or activities they could do while they are students here on campus, other than stay away from some of the things you've talked about? I'll just throw that out there.
Psychology is always very good. Sociology and psychology are both very good topics to help them understand other human beings. The overall knowledge base really helps a lot of the, you know, we talked a little bit about the difference between young folks who have a degree and young folks who don't. And a lot of times it's just the whole learning process in its entirety, not necessarily one specific topic, but the learning process, and it helps to propel them on that road of learning more, so that when they do go to those courses like for action reconstruction and for crime scene training or whatever, they approach it from a different perspective and a different student's mindset. So how many of you, yes ma'am?
Sorry about that. You said that officers have take-home cars and like the K-9 units also. Mm-hmm. So does that mean that the dogs go home with those officers also?
Mm-hmm. That's true. The dogs actually live with our deputies. I got to tell you, I got to put a plug in for our K-9 program. Number one, it's entirely supported by donations. People in general love dogs, and we have a couple of benefactors, a number of benefactors who have donated money to our agency for our dog program. So the equipment in their cars, and they have some specialized equipment in their cars. Purina, dog food company, donates the dog food for the dogs. We get a reduced rate at the veterinary clinic where we take our dogs. So the community is very supportive of the dogs. And that's one of the reasons why when our deputies apply to be a dog handler, it's like a 7-year commitment, because that dog is going to be part of their family. So we need to make sure that the dog is compatible with their family and that their family is compatible with the dog. And we've had situations where some dogs maybe don't like little kids, for instance. And so it's really got to be a good fit, because it's going to be that way for quite some time. And generally, if a dog develops health issues or any physical kind of problems that may prevent them from continuing on police work, then we will sell that dog to the handler generally for $1. We can't give government property away. So we sell the dog to them for $1, and they are the family pet then. The dogs, wear a harness when they're working, and so the deputies that are dog handlers say, when they go in, they start putting their uniform on, and they put that harness on the dog. The demeanor of the dog changes 180 degrees. They know it's time for work now, and that playtime is over, and they're really a serious demeanor. So it's interesting. Those dogs are smart. They do a great job, and really help us do our job a lot better.
I'm going to throw you a tougher question.
Okay.
You'd mentioned cameras in the car. A real hot topic now in law enforcement is body cameras. Your thoughts?
We have actually held off. Well, number one, a law was passed last year that said if you have a body camera, you have to meet these standards and these policy requirements. And so a couple of issues with that are retention. Body cameras in and of themselves are a good thing, but it just depends upon where they're located on the body and what they see. So the problem is most cameras are mounted about here, either pocket or about lapel level. So if you're drawing your firearm, you're going to block the view of the camera, majority. If you're going to, you ever watched a really bad home movie where it's real jittery? If the camera's mounted on the head, even if the deputy is like this, they're going to be continually scanning about 270 degrees for any other potential dangers. So you may not see the danger ahead if the deputy's looking this direction. So it's really a difficult thing. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't see, and what you don't see is what gives speculation to maybe it wasn't there. So there are some real issues with those cameras, but the biggest issue is not the price of the camera, not the view of the camera, because we've been using in-car cameras for years. A couple of issues are, when do they get turned on? So if I'm at your house taking a report about your stolen tractor or battery out of your tractor, do you want me recording that? If your child has run away from home and I'm taking a missing person report, do you want that on camera? But if I'm there on domestic disturbance, we want that to be on camera. So kind of sorting that all out is an issue on individual rights. And then the retention. The legislature, in their infinite wisdom, or lack of, has specified some retention periods for different types of footage. So if it's evidence, it has to be retained this long. If it's non-evidence, it has to be retained this long. If it's da-da-da. Well, that stuff, storage, as you know, costs money. And so the retention periods that they have mandated in their state law from last year have been really, really expensive. And we are just not prepared to develop the storage program to adopt that. So we're going to hold off on cameras mainly because of the bill they passed. So good thing. I mean, it's really simple with our patrol cars, because our patrol cars, the camera is activated when the red lights go on. So when you turn your red lights on, the camera comes on, it records that traffic stop. You have a mic here, so we have audio and visual, and it's really handy, and it's worked out marvelous. Body cameras just aren't as simple as that. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Is there any sort of special car or limited edition car that you own that you'd like to talk about at all? Like a Corvette, maybe?
Yeah. What a smart guy this guy is. He gets extra credit for the class. You obviously know me. Those are Corvette Grand Sports, made in 1996. They only made 1,000 of them. There's only 7 in Nebraska. There's only 2 in Lincoln. And my friend and I both have one. So that's the 2 Grand Sports in Lincoln, and that's kind of my baby. So I was a gearhead in high school too, but. Oh, I see. Okay. The sheriff from the adjoining county. Speaking of sheriffs, do you guys all know how I get my job? You know? How do I get my job? I'm sorry? Voted in. Very good. So, let's say you're a deputy sheriff with Lancaster County, and I get voted out. What happens to your job? Promotion? No, how about like none? It depends upon the county. That's the answer to the question. Some counties are protected. Our employees are protected. So if I die, get bounced on election, if I don't get reelected, my employees still have jobs. Other counties, from smaller counties, that's not necessarily true. So a new sheriff could come in and appoint all new deputy sheriffs, and all the ones that were there could be gone. So if you're looking at sheriff's offices, especially because of the elected nature of the office, kind of unusual. And could be a little tenuous depending upon where you're at. Some states, deputies are never protected. You get into Georgia, some of those southern states, those employees are at will. So new sheriff comes in, all new deputies if he wants them, she wants them. Okay? Anything else? Yes, sir.
What would you say are some keys in running Lancaster County and working with all the different agencies and stuff, such as like UNLPD or
Okay.
Lincoln Police?
You know, it's interesting. His answer was what was some of the keys on our interagency cooperation or working together, and really, it's you know, if you look at the coasts, for instance, a county this size would have 3 times the number of deputies we have, and a city the size of Lincoln would have 3 times the number of cops that we would have, and so really the bottom line is none of us are big enough to say I don't need your help or I don't need your help or I don't need your help. So we work together kind of out of necessity. You know, we can't do it alone. It's like I talked about our crime scene investigators and some of our other like our emergency rescue vehicle. When LPD needs that, they give us a call and we go. If we need their help, you know, and we have interlocal agreements in place to be able to provide those services to other agencies in this county and to other counties. But we're just not big enough to, I call it a kingdom mentality. Some agencies say, you know what, this is our kingdom, don't come into our kingdom, we're not gonna go out of our kingdom, leave us alone. And that just, from a couple of different standpoints, that just doesn't work today. You know, criminals don't stay in or out of that kingdom, and it's not the best use of resources by any means. So it's just getting along. Interesting, right now, all 3 agency heads in Lincoln, the University Police Chief, the Lincoln Police Chief, and myself are all products of the Sheriff's Office. We all started our careers at the Sheriff's Office. So kind of a feather in our cap, kind of a neat little tidbit there. So, do you have a question, ma'am?
Who all becomes deputy sheriffs? Do you just decide after college that you're going to do that and go through that half-year training process, or do you get people from other agencies who want to come in, or the military? And is it usually a deputy who would try to get the sheriff's position?
Okay, lots of different questions there. I was a deputy sheriff when I ran for office, to go backwards, but the previous 4 sheriffs before me were former Lincoln police officers who had run for sheriff and got elected. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a sheriff's deputy to run for sheriff. It really could be anybody. And you don't necessarily have to be a law enforcement officer to run for sheriff. You have, you know, they say you have to be certifiable. Not certifiably crazy, but certifiable as far as being able to go to Grand Island and become a certified law enforcement officer. The other question was, okay. So yeah, and we like folks from other agencies because they've already gone through the training in Grand Island for certification. One of the guys we just hired in September or in October was a former University of South Carolina police officer in Columbia. And his wife took a job here at UNL, so he moved here and took a job with us. So there's processes in place to equate his training in South Carolina with Nebraska training and then upgrade it wherever, like for our state laws, those kinds of things. So we hire Lincoln police officer, former deputy sheriffs, other law enforcement officers are a good source for us because it saves us a lot of money. Really upsets my colleagues in Seward County and other counties if we steal their employees, but because they paid for the time that they were getting certified. So it's always kind of a friendly bantering about that. So, and then the military veterans get preference points. They get 5 percentage points for preference. And so that generally helps them a little bit, but yeah, we've got a couple of deputies who are former military that just do a really good job. And I don't know what their MOS was. It wasn't necessarily military police in the military, but whatever their job was in the military has been a good asset, good fit for us. So.
I do see the clock says 1. Out of this speech, I got to figure out which one was a marshal and a sheriff. I mean, Andy of Mayberry, you guys, that's what you've learned. You got to go watch Mayberry RFD. I got to figure out which Matt Dillon and Wyatt Earp and all that. So
yeah.
We've all learned some things here today. Thank you, Sheriff, very much for coming on this snowy day. Thank you for coming. And if you want some punch and cookies, follow us. We're going to go right down the steps over here. And the sheriff did say he recognized that you're people he's looking to hire. And so I know he'd love to meet you, chat with you a little bit, but I also know you got biology lab or whatever to go to as well. Thank you.
Lancaster.ne.gov, if you want to go to our website, a lot of the information here, it's really full of a lot of stuff, and it'll tell you a lot more than I just did and a lot more in-depth stuff that you can refer to, so take a look at it.